Okay, so for my CBA one, I'm just looking at the impact of water on timber, and then we're just going to look at it in the context of using wood preservatives to try and stop this from happening. Okay, so first of all, so research and research and analysis. So I just to start off with a brainstorm, looking at different areas that we're going to focus on throughout the CBA. So moisture content, then maybe wood defects, the impact that defects have, and then we're going to look at preservatives that might help prevent this from happening. We're going to do some testing, and then we'll have a conclusion at the end. So first of all, there we just start off just looking at a graph. So the graph is going to show that the strength of timber, say, decreases the more that the moisture content increases. It's just a helpful visual just to try and understand how water impacts on wood. Then we're just going to look at the wood defects that occur as a result of, say, increased moisture content or the impact of water on wood. So fungi and wood rot are kind of the two most common ones. You can see there in the pictures that the wood kind of splits, say, once it rots, and we can see the fungal growth as well on the picture down the bottom left. So concepts and application. So how can we prevent this from happening? So this is where we're going to focus in on our wood preservatives. So by, say, applying a form of preservative to the timber, obviously this will help prevent withering or decay from water or rain. So the three possible preservatives that we're going to look at are varnish, paint, and Danish oil. So then just kind of thinking kind of abstract or looking at different concepts, so kind of in real life examples. So we're just going to look at, say, these timber stacks in the sea. So why is the wood affected in three different ways on the same individual piece? So you have constant contact with water, you have contact with water and then contact with sunlight, and then you have the top part of the pole which is never in contact with the water but has constant contact with sunlight, and say the different effects that occur as a result of this. Just kind of looking at or comparing two different boats here. So you see obviously one is in good condition and the other has been affected by wood rot, and we see you can see fungal growing as well. So just kind of showing the importance of maintaining the correct preservative throughout time so that the timber stays in its best form for as long as possible. So then for our experiment and testing, so when students are in first year, we're going to take four different pieces of timber, or four the same pieces of timber, and we're going to apply a varnish to one, a paint to another, Danish oil to the other, and then our last one is going to have no finish at all. So we're going to leave these pieces outside in the open to where, say, water and rain and that can act on it, and we can see what happens to the timber over time. So then the results of this, so when we come back in third year and we look at the four different pieces, so we see that the piece that is varnished, it didn't rot and there was no fungal growth present. So obviously this helped with the impact of water, that the water didn't have really any impact on the timber and it stayed in its kind of most it kind of held its strength throughout the 2 years. We looked at the piece that had paint on it and there was no fungal growth present, but it had lost some of its strength over time and the paint had worn. So this kind of showed the importance of maybe that we might have to apply another, say, a layer of paint maybe each year to ensure that it stays preserved for a longer period. We looked at the Danish oil, and this is kind of similar enough to the varnish, but it had weathered a small bit more than the piece with the varnish, so it lost a small bit of its strength. So maybe kind of likewise with the paint, this one needs to be constantly preserved and maybe a layer added maybe every 6 months or every year. And then lastly, then we looked at the piece that had no finish at all. So we seen that there was fungal growth definitely present and wood rot had kicked in, and the piece began to split at the ends and it had lost all its strength and would have been broken easily. So then the kind of results that we pulled from this, that obviously if we don't treat wood with preservatives, that it is vulnerable to wood rot and fungal growth. And then just as a result of, say, in testing the three, the varnish, paint and Danish oil, we kind of came to the conclusion that varnish preserved the wood the best, and it would be kind of the best option to go for outdoor use. So then just the evaluation of our findings. So what we're going to do is we create a report, say, on each piece of timber that we had, discussing maybe the pros and cons of each finish and which ones worked best and which ones obviously didn't work not so well. We look at the piece that had no finish at all applied to it, and we're going to test, say, the strength of it and see obviously that the piece breaks very easily and that it had split at the ends, and then compare them to maybe the other three pieces of timber. And then just kind of as overall learning, so we want to understand the importance of using preservatives on timber to help them last as long as they can, and then kind of relating back to the impact that water does have on timber. So that obviously the higher moisture content, the more exposed that the timber will be to defects such as fungal growth and wood rot. We learned about the defects, fungal growth and wood rot, and how they thrive on moisture contact within timber. And then lastly, then the students just kind of develop their own personal opinion, and they draw conclusions from the CBA and understand the importance of using wood preservatives, and obviously they understand the impact that water can have on timber. So then just pulling it back to a kind of local relevance. So for future classroom activities, students will know which preservatives to use, and then they obviously appreciate the beauty of timber and the need to preserve it, and just not to kind of not look after it. And then just for future kind of references, so in the building of homes, make sure that there's no, say, moisture or dampness that will affect, say, the overall structure of the home. And then, say, kind of, for example, here we've looked at the garden fence, so students know how to correctly preserve the garden fence with the correct preservative that will help it to last longer.